The gold nib of my monthly 2 inches above the signature line. The paper beneath it, a 94-page corporate acquisition agreement, felt crisp, heavy, and smelled faintly of fresh chemical toner and immense, life-altering wealth. "Whenever you're ready, Thomas," the corporate attorney said, his voice smooth, echoing slightly in the glass-walled boardroom on the 50th floor of the Manhattan Tower. "Once you sign, the wire transfer of $68 million will hit your private account within 3 minutes. Hale Logistics will officially belong to Vanguard Global." I looked out the window. The city below looked like an intricate toy model, its yellow cabs crawling along the avenues like tiny, industrious ants. For 34 years, I had built that logistics company from a single, rusted delivery van into a tri-state empire. I had missed dinners, developed an ulcer, and watched the hair at my temples turn a stark, permanent silver. But I wasn't thinking about the trucks, or the warehouses, or the $68 million. I was thinking about Clara. My daughter was 24 now. She was sitting 3 chairs down from me at the massive mahogany table, her eyes fixed on the contract. She had my late wife's dark, expressive eyes, but today, they were shadowed by something heavy, something tired. For the past 2 years, since she graduated, she had been my shadow at the company, learning the finances, sitting in on board meetings, preparing to inherit the empire. This sale wasn't my retirement plan. It was her freedom. "Dad?" Clara whispered, her voice cutting through the clinical silence of the boardroom. She reached over, her hand resting gently on my sleeve. "You don't have to do this if it hurts too much to let go. We can keep running it together." And the tightness in my chest loosened. She thought I was hesitating because of pride. She didn't know that every single dollar of this $68 million was already designated for a trust fund in her name. I was cashing out so she would never have to work an 80-hour week, never have to compromise her life for a ledger, and never have to know the crushing stress that had killed her mother. "It doesn't hurt, sweetheart," I said, offering her a reassuring smile. "It's just ink." I brought the pen down. The black ink flowed smoothly across the page, binding my name to the fortune. The room erupted into polite, corporate applause. Handshakes were exchanged, champagne was poured into crystal flutes, and within 3 minutes, my phone buzzed in my pocket with a notification from my private bank, deposit confirmed, plus $68,000,000.00. Current $8,412,905.11. I showed the screen to Clara. Her breath hitched, a small, trembling smile appearing on her face. "We're celebrating tonight," I announced to the remaining lawyers. "Just the 2 of us. At Marcel's." Marcel's was the most exclusive restaurant in the city, an old-money establishment where tables were booked 6 months in advance. But when you have $68 million in ink still drying in your pocket, doors open with a whisper. By 8 in the evening, the rain had started to fall outside, blurring the neon lights of the city into long, bleeding streaks of red and gold. Inside Marcel's, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of roasted truffles, expensive perfume, and the low, murmuring hum of wealthy patrons. We were seated at a private corner booth, surrounded by dark wood paneling and heavy velvet curtains that cut us dining room. Clara looked stunning in a dark silk dress, though she seemed unusually quiet, her fingers tracing the rim of her water glass with a rhythmic, anxious motion. "To the future," I said, raising my glass of vintage Bordeaux, a bottle that cost more than my first delivery van. "To your future, Clara. Everything I've ever built, everything I've ever sacrificed, it was always for you." Clara raised her glass, her eyes locked onto mine. There was a strange, sudden intensity in her gaze, a flash of something that looked almost like grief. "To the future, Dad," she said softly. "And to ending the sacrifices." We clinked our glasses. The crystal gave a clear, ringing note that seemed to hang in the air between us. She took a small sip. I raised the heavy red wine to my lips, inhaling the deep, oaky aroma. Ready to take the first taste. "Excuse me, Mr. Hale," a low, clinical voice interrupted from the shadows of the curtain. I paused, the rim of the glass hovering just millimeters from my bottom lip. A waiter had stepped into the booth. He was a tall, sharp-featured man in his late 20s, wearing the immaculate black and white uniform of the restaurant. His name tag read Julian. But his face wasn't polite. It was bone white, his jaw clenched so tightly the muscles in his cheek were twitching, and his eyes were wide with a quiet, vibrating panic. "Can it wait?" I asked, slightly annoyed by the interruption of our toast. "We're in the middle of something." The waiter didn't step back. Instead, he leaned down, ostensibly to adjust the silver pepper mill on the table. He brought his face incredibly close to my ear, his breath hot and trembling against my skin. "Do not drink the wine," the waiter whispered, his voice so low it was barely a vibration in the air. "I just saw your daughter dissolve a white tablet into your decanter in the prep kitchen. Your daughter just put poison in your glass." Video 20, the $68 million poison Chapter 2, The Waiter's Shadow. The waiter's words hung in my ear like a localized freezing current. "Your daughter just put poison in your glass." My hand, still holding the crystal flute of vintage Bordeaux, went completely rigid. The liquid inside rippled, catching the warm, golden light of the table's candle, looking suddenly less like expensive wine and more like dark, stagnant blood. "Is everything all right, sir?" Julian, the waiter, asked aloud, his voice instantly shifting back into the smooth, mechanical tone of a professional server as he straightened up. His eyes, however, stayed locked onto mine for a fraction of a second, a silent, desperate plea for me before he bowed slightly and stepped back into the shadows of the velvet curtains. "Dad?" Clara's voice shattered my paralysis. I looked across the mahogany table. She was watching me, her glass already resting on the white tablecloth, her dark eyes wide with a sudden, sharp curiosity. "You stopped," she said, her voice soft but carrying a strange underlying tension. "You didn't drink. Is there something wrong with the wine?" My heart began to beat with a heavy, sickening thud against my ribs. For 34 years, I had navigated treacherous corporate boardroom battles. I knew how to lock my face into an unreadable mask. I forced my hand to lower the glass back to the table with perfect, steady precision. "No," I said, offering a dry, practiced smile. Just a sudden stitch in my chest. "Old age catch, I suppose." "Dad, don't joke like that," she said, but her eyes didn't leave my glass. Her fingers twitched against her napkin. "You've been working too hard. That's exactly why you signed those papers today. You need to rest. Drink your wine. It'll help you relax. Drink your wine." The phrase echoed in my mind, turning twisted and malicious. I looked at Clara, my little girl, the one who still had her mother's laugh, the one for whom I had just signed away my life's work. Had she really sat in that boardroom 3 hours ago, watching me secure a $68 million fortune, while calculating exactly how many milligrams it would take to stop my heart? "Actually, sweetheart," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "I think I'd prefer a glass of water first. The rain outside always makes the air in here feel incredibly dry." I turned, looking toward the edge of the private booth. "Julian?" The waiter stepped out from the shadows almost instantly, as if he had been waiting right behind the fabric. His face was still pale, his hands tucked tightly behind his back. "Yes, Mr. Hale." "Bring us a fresh bottle of sparkling water, please," I said, keeping my gaze fixed entirely on him. "And Julian, could you check on the preparation of our starters? I want to make sure everything is pristine tonight." "Right away, sir," Julian said. He gave a single, slow nod, acknowledging the hidden command in my voice, and disappeared back toward the kitchen. As soon as he was gone, Clara leaned forward across the table. The warm candlelight caught the sharp angles of her face, and for the first time in my life, she looked like a stranger to me. The innocence I always thought I saw in her eyes felt a mask worn to perfection. "Why are you paying so much attention to the staff tonight, Dad?" she asked, her voice dropping into a low, hurried whisper. She reached out, her hand sliding across the tablecloth toward mine, but I subtly pulled my arm back to adjust my cufflink. Her hand froze in the empty space. "We're supposed to be celebrating. Just you and me. No distractions." "I'm just observing, Clara," I said, leaning back into the heavy leather booth, creating distance between us. "In logistics, you learn to watch the moving parts. If a driver looks agitated, it means the cargo is compromised." That waiter, he looked like he had seen a ghost. Clara's breath hitched. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible sound, but in the tight space of the booth, it sounded like a gunshot. Her gaze flicked toward the kitchen doors, then back to my untouched glass of Bordeaux. "People in this city are always stressed, Dad," she said, her voice tightening as she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Don't worry about him. You earned this night. Don't let a strange waiter ruin the taste of $68 million. She picked up her own glass, raising it slightly. "Come on. One drink. For Mom. She would have been so proud of what you did today." Using my late wife's memory. It felt like a physical knife twisting in my stomach. The false truth of my perfect, loving daughter was fracturing right before my eyes, revealing a cold, calculating architecture underneath. Before I could answer, Julian returned, carrying a silver tray with a green glass bottle of water. But as he approached the table, his foot caught the edge of the heavy velvet curtain. With a sharp, theatrical exclamation, Julian stumbled forward. The silver tray tilted violently. The green glass bottle didn't fall, but Julian's hand shot out to steady himself, directly striking the side of my wine glass. The crystal flute toppled over. The dark, expensive Bordeaux rushed out across the pristine white tablecloth, soaking in massive, spreading stain of fresh blood, rushing toward Clara's side of the table. "Oh my God! I am so sorry, sir." Julian cried out, his voice filled with an exaggerated, trembling panic as he immediately pulled a white cloth from his apron to dab at the spill. "I am completely clumsy. I will replace the bottle immediately." Clara stood up abruptly, drawing her dark silk dress back to avoid the dark liquid dripping over the edge of the mahogany. Her face was no longer composed. It was flushed with a sudden, blinding rage. "Are you blind?" she screamed at Julian, her voice cracking, drawing the attention of the surrounding booths. "Do you have any idea what that bottle cost? Get away from the table. Get the manager out here right now." "Clara, calm down," I said, my voice cutting through her anger like ice. "It's just wine." I looked down at the tablecloth. But I wasn't looking at the spill. I was looking at Julian's hand. As he pretended to wipe the table with the cloth, his fingers skillfully blocked Clara's line of sight. With his other hand, hidden beneath the folds of the heavy linen, he slid a small, wet object across the wood and directly into the open palm of my left hand. It was a small, empty clear plastic vial, its cap missing. I closed my fist around it, the sharp plastic edges digging into my skin. "I don't want a new bottle, Julian," I said, looking up at the terrified waiter, then at my furious daughter. "In fact, I think we're done here. Pack up the remaining food. My daughter and I are going to finish our conversation at home." Video 20, The $68 Million Poison Chapter 3, The Anatomy of Betrayal. The ride back to our estate in Upst wrapped in a suffocating, dense silence. The rain hammered against the roof of the armored Mercedes, creating a frantic, rhythmic drone that matched the chaotic racing of my heart. Clara sat on the opposite side of the leather passenger cabin, her head turned toward the window, watching the distorted city lights bleed into the dark countryside. My left hand remained slipped inside the pocket of my heavy cashmere coat. My fingers tightly gripped the small plastic vial Julian had passed to me. It felt cold, slick, and deadly. The false truth was entirely dead. For years, I believed I was building a fortress of safety for my daughter. Now, sitting across from her, the silence felt like an active investigation. I wasn't just a grieving father anymore, I was a man analyzing a threat. Why? Why would she do this now? The $68 million was... If I died, the trust fund would activate immediately. Did she have a debt? Was she being blackmailed? Or did she simply hate me that much for the years I spent locked in my office away from her? "You're quiet, Dad," Clara's voice suddenly sliced through the hum of the tires. She didn't turn her head. Her reflection in the dark, wet glass of the car window showed her eyes were fixed directly on me. "Just thinking about the future, Clara," I replied, keeping my tone perfectly level, the voice of a CEO managing a crisis. "It's strange to wake up tomorrow and realize I don't own a single truck anymore. 34 years, gone in one signature." Clara turned around slowly. The interior light of the car caught her face, softening her features, making her look exactly like the little girl I used to tuck into bed. It was terrifying how easily she could switch between a cold and daughter. "You didn't lose anything, Dad," she said softly, leaning forward, resting her hands on her knees. "You just converted concrete trucks into pure freedom. $68 million means we never have to worry again. We can finally leave the past behind. Leave the past behind. Or bury me in it." "You're right," I said, forcing a calm smile. "Let's put this stressful night behind us. When we get home, I'll pour us a drink from my private collection. No clumsy waiters to ruin the toast this time." A subtle flicker of panic crossed her face, so fast that if I hadn't been actively analyzing her anatomy, I would have missed it. Her fingers clenched tightly into the fabric of her dress. "Actually, Dad, it's late," she said, her voice rising slightly in pitch. "The rain is giving me a headache. I think I just want when we get back." "Nonsense," I insisted, my voice hardening just enough to signal that this wasn't a request. "It's not every day a man cashes out his life's work. One drink, Clara. For Mom. Just like you wanted at the restaurant." She swallowed hard, her jaw tightening. "Okay. One drink." 10 minutes later, the Mercedes pulled through the heavy iron gates of our estate and stopped in front of the dark, imposing stone mansion. I waited for the driver to open my door, stepped out into the cold night air, and led Clara inside. The house felt hollow, the shadows stretching long across the marble entryway. I walked straight into my private study, a room lined with floor-to-ceiling oak bookshelves, a heavy mahogany desk, and a glass cabinet housing my most expensive spirits. Clara stood by the doorway, her coat still on, her purse tightly against her chest like a shield. She looked around the room as if she were looking at a trap. "Sit down, Clara," I said, walking behind the bar. I took out a crystal decanter of 25-year-old scotch and poured 2 heavy measures into 2 matching lowball glasses. My back was turned to her. Quietly, carefully, I pulled my left hand out of my pocket. Keeping my body blocking her line of sight, I tipped the tiny plastic vial Julian had given me over my own glass. A single, stubborn drop of clear, viscous liquid clung to the rim of the plastic before detaching and falling silently into the amber liquor. It dissolved instantly, leaving no trace, no scent, no warning. I turned around, holding both glasses. I walked over to where she stood and extended my right hand, offering her the uncontaminated glass. In my left hand, I held the glass containing the drugs she had smuggled into Marcel's kitchen. To the architecture of our family, I said, my voice dropping into a low, resonant tone that echoed off the wooden walls. To the secrets we keep to protect the ones we love. Clara reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she took her glass. She looked down at the amber liquid, then looked up into my eyes. "Drink up, sweetheart," I said, raising my glass to my lips, letting the liquid touch my bottom lip without swallowing a single drop. Clara brought her glass to her mouth, but before she could sip, her eyes locked onto the glass in my hand. Her breath caught completely. She stared at the subtle, oily swirl that was barely visible on the surface of my liquor, the distinct signature of a highly concentrated chemical stabilizer. Her face drained of all color. "Dad, wait," she whispered, her voice cracking with terror. "Don't." I slowly lowered the glass, staring at her with cold, unyielding eyes. "Why not, Clara?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "Is there something wrong with the vintage? Or did the waiter tell me the absolute truth?" The crystal glass slipped from Clara's hand. It shattered against the hardwood floor, exploding into 100 glittering shards as the expensive scotch pooled around her expensive shoes. She took a step back, her back hitting the heavy oak door, her hands flying to her mouth as tears finally spilled over her eyes. "You don't understand, Dad," she sobbed, her voice trembling violently. "You don't know what they have on us. If you don't take that tablet, they are going to kill us both by midnight." Video 20, The Poison Chapter 4, The Active Investigation. The word, midnight, echoed through the heavy silence of the study like a ticking time bomb. I stared at the shattered glass on the floor, then looked up at Clara. Her breakdown was absolute. The cold, calculating predator I thought I saw in the Mercedes had evaporated, replaced by a terrified 24-year-old girl cornered by an invisible monster. "Who is they, Clara?" I asked, my voice dropping its defensive armor, becoming the voice of a father again. I walked over, grabbed her trembling shoulders, and looked straight into her tear-filled eyes. "Who is going to kill us by midnight?" "The contract, Dad." She choked out, her hands gripping my forearms so tightly her knuckles turned white. "The people who bought Hale Logistics. Vanguard Global isn't a multinational investment firm. It's a front. It's a financial fortress built by an international syndicate to wash dirty money." My mind raced. 34 years of building my company, and in one afternoon, I had handed the keys over to a ghost network. Why the poison, Clara? If they wanted the company, they already have it. My signature is on the paper. It wasn't poison to kill you. Clara cried out, her voice cracking as she reached into her leather purse, her hands shaking so violently she dropped her keys before pulling out an encrypted black smartphone. It was a medical stabilizer, a compound that mimics a severe stroke. "They didn't want you dead yet, Dad. They needed you incapacitated. In a coma. For the next 72 hours. Why?" "Because of the wire transfer," she whispered, holding up the phone. On the screen was a live tracking ledger of the 68 million. "The money is in your private account, but to move it out of the United States, it requires your biometrics, your physical thumbprint and voice authorization on a secure call tomorrow morning. If you're dead, the bank freezes the funds for probate. If you're healthy, you'll fight them. But if you're in a medically induced coma, I hold your power of attorney. They have my loyalty because they have Leo." My breath hitched. Leo. Her fiancé. He had gone to London 3 weeks ago for a logistics conference and had been unusually distant, sending only short, rigid text messages. "They kidnapped him, Dad," Clara sobbed, collapsing onto her knees among the shards of glass. The day after you agreed to the buyout terms. A man called me from an untraceable satellite number. He said if I didn't slip that tablet into if you didn't miss that security call tomorrow while I transferred the 68 million to their offshore accounts, they would send Leo back to me in a box. And then, they would clean up the loose ends. Us. The false truth had completely shattered, revealing a terrifying architecture of blackmail and corporate espionage. My daughter hadn't betrayed me out of greed, she was trying to save the man she loved while navigating a legal minefield. I stood frozen for a 3-second interval, my executive brain instantly kicking into an active investigation. I looked at my watch. 9:45 p.m. We had 2 hours and 15 minutes until midnight. Clara, look at me, I commanded, pulling her up from the floor. Did you see who gave you the tablet? No, she said, wiping her face. It was left in my glove compartment 2 days ago with a note. But tonight, at the restaurant watching me. When I went to the restroom before dinner, a man in a dark suit blocked my path in the hallway. He told me the prep kitchen was clear, and that if the tablet wasn't in your glass by the time the main course arrived, midnight would come early for Leo. A man in a dark suit, I repeated. Suddenly, a realization struck me. Julian. The waiter. How did a server at an elite Manhattan restaurant know exactly what Clara had dissolved in the wine? How did he manage to intercept the vial and warning me unless he wasn't just a waiter? I snatched my coat off the chair, pulled out my own phone, and dialed the private line of Marcel's owner, a man who owed me his entire restaurant supply chain network. Marcus, I said as soon as he picked up. The waiter who served my table tonight. Julian. I need his file. Now. Thomas. Marcus asked, his voice groggy. Don't ask questions, Marcus. Just look up his employment record. It's a matter of life and death. A minute of agonizing silence passed over the line, punctuated only by the sound of Marcus typing on a keyboard miles away. Thomas, that's impossible, Marcus finally said, his voice suddenly laced with fear. I'm looking at the floor schedule for tonight. Table 4, your table, was assigned to a senior server named Robert. We don't have anyone named Julian on the payroll. Let me check the security cameras. Marcus, describe Julian, I interrupted, my blood running cold. I can't see his face clearly on the back alley feed, Thomas, but he just left through the kitchen fire exit 3 minutes after your departure. Wait, he didn't change out of his uniform. He just got into a black SUV. The owner. Thomas, that vehicle, it has government plates. I hung up the phone. Julian wasn't part of the syndicate. And he wasn't a waiter. He was an operative from an entirely different entity altogether, watching the transaction from the shadows. I looked down at the small plastic vial still in my hand. Then, I looked at the encrypted phone Clara was holding. The trap was closing in from all sides, the syndicate, a rogue operative, and a ticking clock counting down to midnight. Dad, what do we do? Clara asked, her eyes wide with panic as the encrypted phone in her hand suddenly began to vibrate. The screen flashed with an unknown, restricted number. It's them, she whispered, her voice trembling. It's the handler. They're calling to confirm if you've taken the stabilizer. I looked at the phone, then at my daughter. The confrontation had officially begun. I reached out and took the vibrating phone from her hand. Answer it, Clara. Put it on speaker. And do exactly what I signal you to do. Video 20, the $68 million poison Chapter 5, the confrontation. The phone vibrated against Clara's palms like a live wire, its aggressive buzzing the only sound cutting through the cold air of my study. I gave her a sharp, definitive nod. With a trembling thumb, she slid the green icon across the glass and hit the speaker button. Is it done? The voice that filled the room didn't sound human. It was heavily modulated, a flat, metallic rasp passed through a military-grade scrambler, sounding like dry leaves scraped across asphalt. Clara swallowed hard, her eyes locking onto mine as she forced her voice to stabilize. He drank. We left the restaurant early because he started feeling dizzy. A heavy, suffocating silence stretched over the line for a 3-second interval. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face remained an unreadable concrete wall. "You are lying, Clara," the voice whispered. The digital modulation couldn't hide the sudden, razor-sharp malice in the tone. "Our man inside Marcel's reported that a clumsy waiter spilled the wine before your father could swallow a single drop. And right now, your father's private medical monitor, which we are acting, shows his heart rate is running at 85 beats per minute. That is not the pulse of a man slipping into a chemical coma." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She looked at me, her eyes screaming in pure panic. They were tracking my biometrics through my smartwatch. Before she could speak, I reached out, took the phone directly from her hand, and brought it close to my face. "The girl didn't lie to you," I said, my voice dropping into the cold, authoritative resonance that had crushed competitors in boardrooms for over 3 decades. "She tried. But I built Hale Logistics from nothing. You think a 24-year-old girl could slip something past me? I caught her. I know everything." A low, distorted chuckle vibrated through the phone speaker. "Ah, Thomas Hale. The architect himself. We expected you to be sharp, but it doesn't matter. Knowing the truth doesn't alter your geometry. Look at your watch, Thomas. It is exactly 10:15 p.m. You have 1 hour and 45 minutes until midnight. If that $68 million isn't cleared and routing toward our offshore accounts by then, Leo's body will be dropped on the steps of the American Embassy in London." "You won't kill him," I countered, leaning my hands heavily on the mahogany desk, staring at the phone as if I were looking directly into the killer's eyes. "If Leo dies, Clara will never authorize the power of attorney. If I refuse to give my biometrics tomorrow morning, the bank locks the $68 million in a federal security vault for a 90-day fraud investigation. Your syndicate loses the money, your shell companies fracture, and your dirty money remains unwashed. You need us alive, and you need us compliant." The voice on the other end went completely rigid. I died instantly. "You think you understand our architecture, Thomas? You think this is just about money?" The voice rasped, the metallic distortion sharpening. "We don't just own the shell companies that bought your logistics network. We own the local police precinct. We own the security grid of your estate. Turn around, Thomas. Look out your window." A sudden chill shot down my spine. I turned my head slowly toward the heavy glass panes of the study window that overlooked the sweeping front lawn of the estate. Down by the iron gates, the security lights had just flickered and died. The high-voltage electric fences groaned, their low, familiar hum fading into pitch blackness. And then, from the thick tree-line bordering the driveway, 2 pairs of bright, blinding headlights cut through the heavy downpour of rain. 2 massive, unmarked black SUVs slipped past the unpowered gate over the wet gravel toward the front doors of my mansion. "We are not waiting until tomorrow morning for your biometrics, Mr. Hale," the voice said, the metallic rasp holding a terrifying note of finality. "Midnight has just been rescheduled. My cleanup crew is on your porch. You will sign the digital wire transfer manually tonight, or we will take your thumbprint from your severed hand." The line went dead. "Dad!" Clara screamed, sprinting toward me as the heavy, distant thud of car doors slamming shut echoed from the front driveway through the stone walls of the house. The confrontation wasn't coming tomorrow. The wolves were already at the door, and the fortress I had built to protect my daughter was about to become our tomb. The heavy oak front doors of the mansion groaned under a brutal, metallic impact. The syndicate's cleanup crew was breaching the house. Dad! We have to run. The basement tunnel, Clara screamed, her voice cracking as she pulled at my arm. No, Clara, I said, my voice completely flat, devoid of fear. I walked over to my desk, sat down in my leather executive chair, and calmly pulled the encrypted black smartphone toward me. The architecture of this trap was completed the moment I signed that contract. There is no running. Are you insane? They're going to kill you. Boom. The front doors shattered open downstairs. Heavy, tactical footsteps began rushing up the marble staircase, heading straight toward the light of my study. I looked at Clara, offering her a calm, weary smile, the same smile I gave her when she was a child afraid of the dark. $68 million, Clara. I told you, I didn't sell my company for a retirement plan. I sold it because I found out who Vanguard 6 months ago. Clara froze, her tears stopping mid-face. What? You think your active investigation was the only one? I whispered as the footsteps reached the hallway outside. I knew they had Leo. I knew they were forcing you to drug me. The clumsy waiter at the restaurant. Julian. He wasn't their man. He was mine. Before Clara could process the words, the study doors were kicked off their hinges. 3 heavily armed men in black tactical gear and balaclavas stormed into the room, their assault rifles raised, laser sights painting red dots across my chest. Behind them walked a man in a pristine, tailored charcoal suit. He wasn't wearing a mask. He held a satellite phone in his hand, the handler. Thomas Hale, the man in the suit said, his voice matching the modulated rasp from the phone, though not chillingly human. End of the road. The thumbprint. Now. Or we make this messy. I didn't flinch. I slowly raised my left hand, showing him my smartwatch. The screen wasn't tracking my heart rate anymore. It was displaying a digital countdown that had just reached midnight. You're right about one thing, pal, I said, leaning back in my chair. Midnight just got rescheduled. Suddenly, the blinding high-beam headlights from the 2 SUVs outside the window didn't just turn off, they were engulfed in a massive, deafening wave of blue and red strobe lights. The dark sky over my estate erupted with the rhythmic, thunderous beating of twin chopper blades. Federal agents. Drop your weapons. The perimeter is secured, a voice boomed from a megaphone outside. The 3 tactical men spun, looking toward the windows. From the shadows of the hallway behind them, a team of federal operators in tactical vests labeled FBI, Organized Crime Division moved in like ghosts. Leading them was the tall, sharp-featured man from the restaurant, no longer wearing a waiter's apron, but a full tactical rig. Weapons on the floor. Now. Julian shouted, his service weapon locked onto the handler's head. The 3 syndicate hitmen, realizing they were completely surrounded by a federal fortress, slowly lowered their rifles and dropped to their knees. The handler's face turned an asymmetric shade of ash gray as Julian slammed him against my mahogany desk, ratcheting zip ties around his wrists. Clara collapsed into a chair, her breath escaping her in a long, trembling gasp. Dad! I don't understand. What is this? Julian stepped forward, wiping a smudge of tactical grease, and looked at Clara. Your father didn't cash out to give you a trust fund, Clara. He used the $68 million as a federal bait trap. The moment that wire transfer hit his account today, it carried a digital forensic marker coded by the FBI. It traced the syndicate's entire offshore architecture within 3 minutes. I stood up, walking over to my daughter, and knelt beside her chair. They were never going to let us live, Clara, I said softly, taking her shaking hands in mine. Even if you gave them the money, Leo and you were liabilities. The only way to save Leo was to let them think their plan was working perfectly. I had to let you believe the lie for just a little while so they wouldn't smell a trap. Julian tapped his earpiece, listened for a moment, and then looked down at us with a genuine smile. Mr. Hale, the London raid was a success. MI6 just from the safe house in Chelsea. He's safe. He's on a secure transport back to New York right now. Clara let out a raw, sobbing cry, not of fear this time, but of pure, overwhelming salvation. She threw her arms around my neck, burying her face into my shoulder as the tears finally washed away the trauma of the past weeks. The false truth of betrayal had collapsed, leaving behind the true, unbreakable architecture of a father's love. I had sacrificed my empire, my security, and risked my own life, not for the ink on a contract, but to ensure that my daughter's future was entirely free. I held her tight against the cold rain outside, watching the feds drag the syndicate out into the flashing lights. For 34 years, I was a CEO. But tonight, as the house went quiet, I was finally just a father.